Detective Michael Reeves noticed her for the third time that week, a young woman, early 20s, hovering near the elementary school where his wife taught second grade. She was trying to be inconspicuous, baggy hoodie, sunglasses, hair tucked under a baseball cap, but Michael hadn't spent 15 years in law enforcement without developing a sixth sense for people who didn't belong, and this woman definitely didn't belong. The first time, he'd dismissed it as coincidence. He'd been dropping off lunch for his wife, Sarah, when he spotted the woman lingering by the school fence, seemingly fascinated by the children at recess. The second time, 2 days later, she was sitting in her car across from the school's main entrance. Now, as he watched from his unmarked police cruiser, she was following Sarah to the coffee shop where she always stopped after school on Fridays. His police instincts kicked into overdrive. He knew the statistics, knew how stalking cases could escalate. He reached for his phone, snapping several photos of the woman through his windshield. Then he called his partner. "Rivera, I need you to run a plate for me." He rattled off the license number of the woman's aging Honda Civic. "And keep it quiet, it's personal." Detective Elena Rivera didn't ask questions. That was one of the things he appreciated about their partnership. "Give me 10 minutes, she said before hanging up. Michael watched as the woman entered the coffee shop shortly after Sarah, maintaining the same careful distance she'd kept all week. Not close enough to seem threatening, but always within sight. He felt his jaw tighten. Whatever game this woman was playing, it ended today. His phone buzzed. "That was fast," he answered. "The car belongs to a Lily Chen, 23, no criminal record," Rivera said. "Address is in Oakwood Heights. Want me to send you the details?" "Please." Michael ended the call, conflict churning inside him. The professional part of his brain told him to call for backup to handle this by the book, but the husband in him, the protector, wanted to confront this threat himself. When Sarah emerged from the coffee shop, the woman, Lily, waited exactly 2 minutes before following. Michael started his engine. He wouldn't approach her now, not with Sarah still in the vicinity, but he wouldn't lose her either. He trailed both women at a distance, watching as Sarah drove home while Lily followed several car lengths behind. When Sarah pulled into their driveway, Lily drove past slowly, then parked around the corner. Michael pulled over and waited, his heart hammering against his ribs. What was this woman's endgame? 10 minutes later, Lily walked past their house, her pace slowing as she approached. She stood across the street, partially hidden by a large oak tree, her gaze fixed on their living room window where Sarah moved about, visible through the curtains. Something in Michael snapped. He got out of his car and approached from behind, his footsteps silent from years of practice. "Police," he said quietly, his voice carrying just enough authority to freeze her in place. "I need you to put your hands where I can see them and turn around slowly." The woman tensed but didn't run. Slowly she raised her hands and turned to face him. Up close, Michael could see she was trembling. "Detective Michael Reeves," he said, showing his badge. "Mind telling me why you've been following my wife for the past week?" Her eyes widened behind her sunglasses. "Your wife?" "Sarah Reeves, the teacher you've been stalking." He kept his voice even despite the anger simmering beneath the surface. "Remove your sunglasses, please." Lily hesitated, then complied. Her eyes were red-rimmed as if she'd been crying. Not what he expected. I didn't mean to." She stumbled over her words. "I just needed to see her." "Why?" Lily glanced toward the house, then back at Michael. "You wouldn't understand. Try me." His hand moved instinctively toward his hip, though he wasn't in uniform and his gun was locked in his glove compartment. "Because right now, you're looking at potential harassment charges." Fear flickered across her face. Please, I'm not trying to hurt anyone. I needed to know what she was like. What she was like? Michael echoed, confusion momentarily replacing his anger. What does that mean? Lily looked down, her hands still raised. Can I put my arms down and show you something? It's in my pocket. Michael hesitated. Slowly, left hand only. She lowered her left hand to her jacket pocket and withdrew a folded piece of paper. With shaking fingers, she offered it to him. Michael took it cautiously, unfolding it while keeping his eyes on her. When he finally glanced down, his breath caught. It was a birth certificate for Lily Chen. Enlisted under Mother was a name he recognized immediately, Sarah Winters, his wife's maiden name. His mind reeled, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. Sarah had never mentioned having a child. They'd been married for 8 years and she'd never once hinted at giving up a baby for adoption. It had to be a mistake or a scam. This is fake, he said, his voice harder than he intended. It's not. Lily's voice was barely above a whisper. She was 17 when she had me. Her parents forced her to give me up. Her eyes filled with tears. I just found out 6 months ago after my adoptive parents died. There was a letter with my adoption papers. Michael's training kicked in, helping him maintain his composure despite the shock. So instead of contacting her directly, you decided to stalk her? I tried calling the school, but they wouldn't give me her contact information. Lily wiped at her eyes. I sent a letter 2 months ago, but I don't know if she ever got it. I just wanted to see her, to know who she is before I approached her. Michael studied the young woman's face, looking for any family resemblance to his wife. There was something about the shape of her eyes, maybe, but he couldn't be sure. What he did know was that Sarah received all their mail, and she'd never mentioned any letter from a daughter she'd supposedly given up for adoption. How do I know this isn't some kind of scam? He demanded. I don't want anything from her, Lily said, her voice steadying. Not money, not a relationship if she doesn't want one. I just needed answers. My whole life I wondered why my birth mother gave me up. And now that I know who she is... She trailed off, glancing again toward the house. Michael's mind raced. If this was true, and that was still a big if, Sarah had kept a massive secret from him their entire relationship. But why? They'd had countless conversations about starting a family. She'd never once hinted that she'd already had a child. Wait here, he said finally, handing the birth certificate back to Lily. Don't move. He crossed the street and entered his house, finding Sarah in the kitchen preparing dinner. She looked up with a smile that faded when she saw his expression. Michael, what's wrong? He struggled to find the words. How do you ask your wife if she's been hiding a child from you for your entire marriage? There's someone outside, he said finally. A young woman named Lily Chen. He watched Sarah's face carefully, but her expression registered only polite confusion. Who? She says. Michael paused, reconsidering his approach. Have you been getting any unusual mail lately? Letters from someone you don't know? Sarah frowned. No, nothing like that. Michael, what's going on? He took a deep breath. This woman claims to be your daughter. She has a birth certificate listing you as her mother. The color drained from Sarah's face. She reached for the counter to steady herself. That's not possible. Sarah, she has documentation. She says you had her when you were 17 and your parents made you give her up for adoption. No. Sarah shook her head vigorously. No, that's not. I never had a baby. Then how does she have a birth certificate with your name on it? I don't know. Sarah's voice rose in distress. Michael, I swear to you, I've never given birth to a child. I would have told you. They stared at each other across the kitchen, 20 feet of tile flooring suddenly feeling like an unbridgeable gulf. Michael had interrogated enough suspects to recognize genuine shock, and Sarah's reaction seemed authentic. But then, so had Lily's. "She's still outside," he said finally. "I need to figure out what's going on here." Sarah nodded, her hands trembling as she wiped them on a kitchen towel. "I'm coming with you." "Are you sure?" "I need to see this person who's claiming to be my daughter." Her voice hardened with determination. "I need to know why she's doing this." They stepped outside together and crossed the street to where Lily still stood beneath the oak tree. As Sarah approached, the young woman's eyes widened, her lips parting slightly as if seeing a ghost. "You look just like your pictures," Lily whispered. Sarah stiffened. "I don't know who you are or why you're doing this, but I've never had a child. That birth certificate must be fake." Lily's face crumpled. "But the adoption papers, then the letter from my parents." Michael stepped between them. "Let's all take a deep breath. There's clearly some confusion here." He turned to Lily. "You said you have adoption papers. Are they with you?" Lily shook her head. "They're at my apartment. But they're real, I swear. They match the birth certificate." Sarah crossed her arms protectively over her chest. "This is insane. I think I would remember giving birth." "Your name is Sarah Elizabeth Winters," Lily said desperately. "You were born on April 12, 1982. You grew up in Millfield. Your parents are Robert and Margaret Winters." Sarah paled further. "How do you know all that?" "It's in the letter. Your parents, my grandparents, they arranged everything. The letter said they threatened to cut you off if you didn't go along with it. They sent you away to your aunt's house for the last few months of the pregnancy. You were told to never speak of it again. That's not..." Sarah stopped abruptly, her expression shifting from disbelief to something more complicated. "I did stay with my aunt the summer before senior year. My parents said I needed a change of scenery after my boyfriend and I broke up." Michael watched his wife's face, recognizing the look of someone accessing a long-buried memory. "Sarah?" She shook her head slightly. "But I wasn't pregnant. I would have known." "Would you?" Lily asked softly. "If everyone around you was determined to make you believe otherwise? The letter said they drugged you when the labor started. You were barely conscious for the delivery." A car drove past, breaking the tension momentarily. Michael realized they were having this intensely private conversation on a public sidewalk. "We should continue this inside," he said. After a brief hesitation, he added, "All of us." Sarah looked at him in alarm. "Michael, you can't seriously..." "We need to get to the bottom of this," he said firmly. "And we can't do that out here." Reluctantly, Sarah nodded. The three of them crossed the street in silence, a strange trio bound together by a mystery none of them fully understood. As Michael held the door open, watching his wife and this young stranger enter his home, he couldn't shake the feeling that regardless of the truth, their lives would never be the same after today. Inside the house, the tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Michael motioned for Lily to sit on the couch while Sarah remained standing, her arms still wrapped protectively around herself. No one spoke for several long moments, the ticking of the wall clock suddenly deafening in the silence. "I'd like to see this letter you mentioned," Michael finally said, his detective voice taking over. Professional, detached. It was easier to approach this as an investigation than as a personal crisis that might shatter his marriage. Lily shifted uncomfortably. "Like I said, it's at my apartment, along with all the adoption paperwork." "Then we should go there," Michael said decisively. Sarah's head snapped up. "We..." "Michael, you can't be serious. This woman shows up with some wild story and a document that could easily be forged, and you want to just..." "I want the truth," he interrupted, his voice gentle but firm. "Don't you—" Sarah fell silent, her face a battleground of emotions. Fear, confusion, and something else, something that looked almost like guilt. "I know this is difficult," Lily said quietly. "I debated for months whether to contact you at all. But after my parents died—" She paused, swallowing hard. "They were good to me, my adoptive parents. They loved me. But there was always this hole, this question of where I came from. I understand wanting to know your biological parents," Sarah said, her voice steadier now. "But I'm not your mother. I would remember something like that." "Would you?" Michael asked before he could stop himself. "If what she's saying is true, if your parents went to such lengths to hide it—" Sarah stared at him, betrayal flashing in her eyes. "Whose side are you on?" "I'm not on anyone's side. I just want to understand what's happening." He turned back to Lily. "Where's your apartment?" "Oakwood Heights, about 20 minutes from here." Michael nodded. "Then that's where we're going." He looked at Sarah. "All of us." The ride to Lily's apartment was silent. Sarah sat in the passenger seat of Michael's car, staring straight ahead, while Lily directed them from the back. Michael's mind raced, trying to piece together the fragments of this bizarre situation. He'd always thought he knew everything about his wife. They'd met 10 years ago when Sarah was 26 and he was 30, a rookie detective with too much confidence and not enough sleep. She'd been the one steady, uncomplicated part of his life. Until now. Lily's apartment building was modest but well-maintained, located in a neighborhood popular with college students and young professionals. She led them up to the 3rd floor, fumbling slightly with her keys before opening the door. The apartment was small but tidy, decorated with framed travel posters and strings of fairy lights. A bookshelf overflowed with paperbacks, and a slightly wilted peace lily sat on the windowsill. It was exactly the kind of place Michael would expect a 23-year-old to live, which somehow made her story more credible. "The papers are in my bedroom," Lily said. "I'll get them." As she disappeared down a short hallway, Sarah turned to Michael, her voice a harsh whisper. "This is insane. You know that, right? We're in a stranger's apartment because she claims to be my long-lost daughter." "I know how it sounds," Michael admitted. "But she knows details about you, Sarah. Your parents' names, your hometown. That's not information someone just guesses. She could have found all that online. Maybe. But why? What would she gain from this elaborate lie?" Before Sarah could answer, Lily returned carrying a manila envelope and a faded blue box. She set them on the coffee table and gestured for them to sit. "Everything's here," she said. "The adoption papers, my birth certificate, and the letter my parents left me." She extracted a sealed envelope from the box. "This is it. I only found it after they died in the car accident 6 months ago." Michael took the envelope carefully. It was addressed simply to our daughter in elegant handwriting. He handed it to Sarah. "You should read it first." Sarah hesitated, then took the envelope. Her hands trembled slightly as she broke the seal and unfolded the letter inside. Michael watched her face as she read, saw the color drain from her cheeks, saw her eyes widen with shock and then fill with tears. When she finished, she silently passed the letter to Michael, her hand shaking visibly now. The letter was dated 18 months earlier, clearly written by people who knew they might not be around to explain things in person. It began with expressions of love and apology for keeping secrets, then moved into the explanation Lily had already outlined. They weren't her biological parents. They had adopted her at birth from a teenage girl named Sarah Winters, whose parents had orchestrated the entire arrangement. The details were disturbing. According to the letter, Sarah had been kept sedated through much of the labor and delivery, told afterward that she'd had complications requiring surgery, but that everything was fine now. Her parents had created an elaborate lie about a medical emergency to explain her absence from school and social activities. The adoption had been handled privately through a lawyer friend of Sarah's father, with minimal paperwork to avoid leaving a trail. "This can't be real," Sarah whispered when Michael looked up from the letter. "My parents wouldn't do this. They couldn't." Lily reached into the box again and pulled out a yellowed newspaper clipping. This was with the letter. It's from the Millfield Gazette, dated July 1999. The clipping was small, just a few paragraphs about local teenager Sarah Winters recovering from emergency appendicitis while staying with relatives. There was even a quote from Margaret Winters expressing gratitude to the medical staff who had taken such good care of our daughter during this difficult time. Sarah stared at the clipping, her breathing shallow. "I remember this. I remember my mother telling the newspaper I'd had appendicitis." She looked up at Michael, her eyes wide with dawning horror. "But I still have my appendix. I've never had surgery of any kind." "Except maybe a C-section," Michael said quietly. Sarah's hand went instinctively to her abdomen. "No, that's not. I would have a scar." "Not necessarily," Lily said. "The letter says they were very careful about that. The doctor was a friend of your father's." Michael turned his attention to the adoption papers. They looked legitimate at first glance, but there were inconsistencies. The signatures seemed genuine, but some of the official stamps and seals appeared to be photocopied rather than original. It was the kind of detail most people wouldn't notice, but his years in law enforcement had trained him to spot such discrepancies. "These documents have been altered," he said finally. "Some parts are legitimate, others aren't. It's like someone started with real adoption papers and modified them." "Is that even possible?" Sarah asked. "With the right connections, anything's possible." Michael set the papers down. "We need to talk to your parents." Sarah shook her head vehemently. "No, absolutely not. Sarah, you don't understand. If there's even a remote possibility this is true, I can't face them, not yet." Lily had been watching the exchange quietly. Now she spoke up. "There might be another way to know for sure." They both turned to look at her. "A DNA test," she said simply. "If Sarah is my biological mother, a test will confirm it." Michael nodded slowly. "That makes sense." "And what if I am?" Sarah's voice cracked. "What then? We just become one big happy family? You've been stalking me, Lily, following me around, watching my home." "I know, and I'm sorry," Lily said. I needed to work up the courage to approach you. I needed to see what kind of person you were before I turned your life upside down." "Well, mission accomplished," Sarah said bitterly. Michael placed a gentle hand on his wife's shoulder. "A DNA test is a good idea. It will give us clarity, one way or another." Sarah brushed his hand away. "And if it's positive, if my parents really did this to me, what then?" "Then we'll deal with it," Michael said firmly. "Together." Sarah looked from Michael to Lily and back again, trapped between a past she couldn't remember and a future she couldn't predict. Finally, she nodded. "Fine. We'll do the test." The next few days were a blur of tension and strained silence. They ordered DNA testing kits online, the three of them providing samples in the awkward privacy of Michael and Sarah's living room before sealing everything up and sending it off to the lab. The results would take about a week. Sarah refused to stay in the house with Michael, choosing instead to go to her friend Diane's place. "I need space," she'd said, her voice flat. "I can't think clearly with both of you watching me, waiting for me to remember something I'm not sure even happened." Michael didn't fight her on it. He knew she needed time to process, to reconcile the possibility that her entire understanding of her past might be built on lies. But her absence left a void in the house, a constant reminder of how quickly everything had unraveled. He used the time to do what he did best: investigate. He started digging into Robert and Margaret Winters, looking for anything that might corroborate Lily's story. He discovered that Robert, a prominent attorney, had indeed been close friends with several doctors, including an obstetrician who had since passed away. Margaret had served on the board of a private adoption agency for years, though she'd stepped down around the time Sarah would have been pregnant. It wasn't proof, but it added plausibility to Lily's claims. People in those positions would have had the connections and influence to orchestrate such a cover-up. Lily had returned to her own apartment, but she and Michael spoke daily. He found himself drawn to her, not romantically, but with a detective's curiosity and a growing sense of protectiveness. If she really was Sarah's daughter, that made her family, regardless of how she'd come into their lives. 5 days after they'd sent off the tests, Michael's phone rang. It was Sarah. "I remembered something," she said without preamble, her voice thin and strained. "From that summer. I don't think it's a real memory, more like flashes, feelings, being confused and pain. Voices talking about me like I wasn't there." Michael closed his eyes. "Sarah, I think we need to talk to my parents," she continued. "Before the test results come back, I need to hear it from them." "Are you sure?" "No." She gave a hollow laugh. "I'm not sure of anything anymore. But I need to know, Michael. I need to know if they did this to me." "Do you want me to come with you?" A pause. "Yes. And I think Lily should come too. If this is real, if she's really my daughter, my parents need to face what they did to both of us." Michael agreed, and they made plans to drive to Millfield the next day. As he hung up, he stared at the phone in his hand, wondering how one chance encounter could upend so many lives so completely. Whatever happened tomorrow, nothing would ever be the same. Millfield was a picture-perfect suburb, the kind featured in real estate brochures and family sitcoms. Wide streets lined with mature trees, immaculate lawns, and houses that spoke of old money and careful preservation. Michael had only visited a handful of times during his relationship with Sarah. Her parents had always preferred to come to them, maintaining control over when and how they engaged with their daughter's life. Now, as he drove down the shaded streets toward the Winters colonial-style home, he understood why. The town itself was a fortress, a carefully constructed illusion of perfection. The kind of place where appearances mattered more than reality, where secrets could be buried beneath manicured gardens and country club memberships. Sarah sat beside him, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. She hadn't spoken much during the drive, lost in her own thoughts. Lily was in the back seat, equally silent. The weight of what they were about to do hung heavy in the car. "We're here," Michael said unnecessarily as he pulled into the circular driveway of the Winters home. Sarah took a deep breath. "They don't know we're coming." "Good," Michael replied. "They won't have time to prepare." "My mom always hated surprises," Sarah said, a hint of bitter amusement in her voice. They approached the front door together, an unlikely trio united by a shared purpose. Michael rang the doorbell, its cheerful chime at odds with the gravity of the moment. Margaret Winters answered, her surprise quickly masked by the practiced smile of a woman who had spent decades perfecting social niceties. "Sarah, Michael. What a lovely surprise." Her gaze shifted to Lily, faltering slightly. "And who might this be?" Sarah's voice was steady, though Michael could see the tension in her shoulders. "We need to talk to you and Dad, Mom. Is he home?" "Of course, he's in his study. Come in, come in." Margaret stepped aside, her smile never wavering, though her eyes kept darting to Lily with poorly concealed unease. They followed her through the immaculate house to a formal living room that looked more like a museum exhibit than a space where people actually lived. Everything was perfectly arranged, from the decorative pillows to the family photos displayed on the mantel, carefully curated snapshots of a perfect family life. "Robert," Margaret called, "Sarah and Michael are here, and they've brought a friend." Robert Winters emerged from his study moments later, a distinguished man in his 60s with silver hair and wire-rimmed glasses. His expression was pleasant but guarded. "What a surprise! To what do we owe the pleasure?" No one sat. The formalities of a normal family visit seemed absurd under the circumstances. "This is Lily Chen," Sarah said without preamble. "She came to our house a few days ago with an interesting story. She says I'm her biological mother." The change in the room was immediate and profound. Margaret's carefully composed expression cracked, her hand flying to her throat. Robert went completely still, his eyes narrowing slightly behind his glasses. "That's absurd," Margaret said, her voice higher than normal. "Sarah, what on earth?" "She has a birth certificate with my name on it," Sarah continued, her voice gaining strength. "And adoption papers, and a letter from her adoptive parents explaining how you arranged the whole thing, how you kept me sedated through labor and delivery, how you made up a story about appendicitis, how you threatened to cut me off if I ever mentioned the pregnancy." Robert stepped forward, his attorney's composure reasserting itself. "I don't know what kind of scam this young woman is trying to pull, but surely you can't believe—" "What happened the summer before my senior year of high school, Dad?" Sarah interrupted. "When you sent me to stay with Aunt Catherine? What happened to Kevin, the boyfriend you suddenly decided wasn't good enough for me?" Robert's jaw tightened. "That was over 20 years ago, Sarah. What does it matter now?" "It matters because I'm starting to remember things," Sarah said, her voice trembling slightly. "Pieces, fragments. Being sick all the time, feeling confused, waking up in pain, people talking about me like I wasn't there." Margaret sank onto the sofa, her perfect posture collapsing. "Sarah, please, is it true?" Sarah demanded. "Did I have a baby? Did you take my child away from me and make me believe it never happened?" The silence that followed was deafening. Robert and Margaret exchanged a long look, some unspoken communication passing between them. Finally, Robert sighed and removed his glasses, pinching the bridge of his nose. "We did what we thought was best for you," he said quietly. The words landed like a physical blow. Sarah staggered slightly, and Michael moved to support her, his arm around her waist. "Oh my God," she whispered. "It's true. It's all true." "You were 17, Margaret said, finding her voice. "Just a child yourself. That boy, Kevin, he wasn't going anywhere, had no ambition. Your whole future was ahead of you. College, career. We couldn't let you throw it all away." "So you drugged me?" Sarah's voice rose. "You let me believe I'd had appendicitis. You gave away my baby without my consent." "You weren't in a position to make that decision," Robert said, his tone maddeningly reasonable. "We were your parents. It was our responsibility to look out for your best interests." "Your best interests," Michael corrected, unable to stay silent any longer. "Not Sarah's. You didn't want the embarrassment of a pregnant teenager. You didn't want your country club friends whispering behind your backs." Robert's eyes flashed. "You have no right to judge us. You weren't there. You don't know what it was like." "I know you violated your daughter's bodily autonomy," Michael retorted. "I know you committed fraud, falsified medical records, and conducted an illegal adoption. I know you gaslighted your own child for over 2 decades. Those aren't the actions of concerned parents. They're the actions of people willing to commit crimes to maintain their reputation." Throughout this exchange, Lily had remained silent, watching the family drama unfold with wide eyes. Now she took a tentative step forward. "I don't want to cause trouble," she said softly. "I just wanted to know where I came from, who I came from." Margaret looked at her properly for the first time, her expression a complex mixture of emotions. "You look like him," she said faintly. "Like Kevin. The same eyes." Sarah turned to Lily, really seeing her in a new light. The shape of her eyes, the curve of her jaw, features that had seemed vaguely familiar now took on new significance. "We have a DNA test pending," Michael said. "But I don't think we need it anymore, do we?" Robert straightened, his lawyer's mind clearly assessing the situation. "What exactly do you want from us? Money, is that it?" Lily shook her head vehemently. "No. I told you, I just wanted to know my biological mother. I have a good job. I don't need your money." "Then what?" Margaret asked, genuinely bewildered. "What do you expect to happen now?" "I expect you to acknowledge what you did," Sarah said, her voice steadier now. "I expect you to apologize. To me and to Lily. Beyond that, I don't know. I'm still trying to process the fact that you stole 23 years from us. 23 years I could have known my daughter." "We gave you a chance at a normal life," Robert insisted. "Look at what you've accomplished. College, career, marriage. None of that would have been possible if you'd been burdened with a child at 17. "That wasn't your decision to make," Sarah said, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. "And you have no idea what I might have accomplished even with a child. You never gave me the chance to try." Margaret rose from the sofa, approaching Sarah cautiously. "Darling, we only wanted what was best for you. Surely you can understand that." Sarah stepped back, away from her mother's outstretched hand. "What's best for me would have been the truth. What's best for me would have been parents who respected my autonomy enough to let me make my own choices, even difficult ones." "You were a child," Robert reiterated. "I was old enough to give birth," Sarah countered. "Old enough that you should have at least told me what happened afterward. Instead, you've been lying to me my entire adult life." The room fell silent again. Michael watched his in-laws' faces, seeing the slow realization dawn that this wasn't something they could smooth over with justifications or appeals to parental authority. The magnitude of what they'd done, and kept hidden for over 2 decades, was finally sinking in. "I think," Lily said tentatively, breaking the tense silence, "that what Sarah needs right now is space and time. This is a lot for anyone to process." Michael glanced at her with newfound respect. For someone so young, she was showing remarkable emotional maturity. "Lily's right," he said. "We didn't come here for a resolution. We came for the truth, and now we have it." Sarah nodded, wiping away her tears. "I don't know when or if I'll be ready to talk to you again," she told her parents. "What you did, it changes everything. I need time to figure out what it means for me, for all of us." Robert looked like he wanted to argue, but Margaret laid a restraining hand on his arm. "We understand," she said quietly, though her expression suggested she didn't understand at all. As they turned to leave, Robert called after them. "The boy, Kevin, he never knew either. We made sure of that. He went off to college on the West Coast, and as far as I know, he never came back to Millfield." Sarah paused at the door. "His last name was Cho, wasn't it? Kevin Cho." Robert nodded. "Then that explains why her name is Chen," Sarah said softly. "Her adoptive parents must have been Chinese too." "Taiwanese," Lily corrected gently. "My adoptive dad was from Taiwan. My mom was American." The connection, the evidence of Sarah's relationship with Kevin, preserved in their daughter's adoptive name, seemed to hit Sarah anew. She swayed slightly, and Michael steadied her again. "Let's go," he murmured. They left the house without another word, the perfect facade of the winter's life permanently fractured behind them. As they walked to the car, Sarah suddenly stopped and turned to Lily. "I'm so sorry," she said, her voice breaking. "I'm so sorry they took you from me, that I didn't know, that I couldn't look for you." Lily's eyes filled with tears. "It wasn't your fault. But you're my daughter, my child." And I never even got to hold you." The two women stood facing each other, 23 years of separation stretching between them like an uncrossable chasm. Then, hesitantly, Sarah opened her arms, and Lily stepped into them. They clung to each other, both crying now, while Michael looked on, his own eyes burning with unshed tears. It wasn't a happy ending. There was too much pain, too much loss for that. But it was a beginning, a chance to build something new from the wreckage of the past. A family forged, not through deception, but through truth. The drive back from Millfield was quiet, each of them lost in their own thoughts. Sarah stared out the passenger window, occasionally wiping away a tear that escaped despite her efforts to maintain composure. Lily sat in the back seat, her fingers absently tracing patterns on the leather upholstery, her face a mixture of relief and uncertainty. Michael focused on the road, his detective's mind still processing the implications of everything they'd learned. When they reached the city limits, Sarah finally broke the silence. "I'd like us to go home. All of us." She turned slightly to include Lily in her gaze. "If that's okay with you?" Lily nodded, a tentative smile crossing her face. "I'd like that." At the house, Michael made coffee while Sarah and Lily settled in the living room. The awkwardness between them was palpable. Too many years lost, too many questions unanswered, too much emotion churning beneath the surface. "I don't even know where to begin," Sarah admitted as Michael handed her a steaming mug. "What do you say to the daughter you never knew you had?" Lily cradled her own mug, her eyes downcast. "I've been imagining this moment for months, and now I don't know what to say either." Michael sat beside Sarah on the couch, his presence a silent support. "Maybe start with the basics," he suggested gently. "Get to know each other as people first." Sarah nodded gratefully. "That makes sense." She turned to Lily. "Tell me about your life, your childhood, your parents, your adoptive parents, I mean." "They were wonderful," Lily said, a hint of guilt in her voice, as if praising them might somehow hurt Sarah. "My dad was an engineer. My mom taught piano. We weren't rich, but we were comfortable. They made sure I had everything I needed." "They sound like good people," Sarah said softly. "They were. They loved me very much," Lily's voice caught slightly. "That's part of why it was so hard when they died. I always felt so secure, so certain of who I was and where I belonged, and then suddenly they were gone, and I found that letter, and everything I thought I knew about myself just collapsed." Sarah's eyes filled with tears again. "I'm so sorry about your parents, and I'm sorry my parents' actions put you in this position." "It's not your fault," Lily insisted. "None of this is your fault." Michael watched the two women, mother and daughter, as they navigated the treacherous waters of their shared history. There was so much pain there, so much lost time, but also a tentative hope. The beginning of a connection that should have existed all along. Later that evening, after Lily had gone home with promises to return the next day, Michael found Sarah sitting alone in the darkened kitchen, a glass of wine untouched before her. "How are you holding up?" he asked, sliding into the chair across from her. Sarah gave a hollow laugh. "How do you think? I just found out I gave birth at 17 and had no memory of it because my parents basically drugged and gaslighted me. Oh, and I have a 23-year-old daughter I never knew existed." Michael reached across the table to take her hand. "It's a lot to process." "That's an understatement." She looked up at him, vulnerability written across her face. "What does this mean for us, Michael, for our marriage? We always talked about having children someday, and now I find out I already have one. A grown woman with her own life, her own history that I wasn't part of." "It doesn't change how I feel about you," Michael said firmly. If anything, it makes me love you more, knowing what you've endured. But I'm not the same person you married. I don't even know who I am anymore." Michael squeezed her hand. "You're still Sarah. You're still the woman I fell in love with. This doesn't change your character, your heart. It just adds a new dimension to your story." Sarah looked unconvinced. "I keep thinking about Kevin, my boyfriend back then, Lily's father. She has his eyes, did you notice? I hadn't thought about him in years, and now I can't stop wondering if he ever suspected, if he ever tried to find out what happened to me after my parents sent me away." "Do you want to find him?" Michael asked carefully. Sarah hesitated. "I don't know. Maybe. He deserves to know he has a daughter, but what would I even say to him after all this time?" "You don't have to decide anything tonight," Michael reminded her. "One step at a time, remember? That's how we've always handled things." Sarah nodded, her eyes distant. "I'm starting to remember more. Little flashes. Being sick all the time. My clothes getting tight. My mother watching me like a hawk, counting calories, telling me I was gaining too much weight." She shuddered. "How could they do this to me, Michael? How could they look me in the eye every day for 23 years and pretend nothing happened?" Michael had no answer. As a detective, he'd seen people commit all manner of crimes, but the calculated cruelty of what the Winters had done to their own daughter was beyond his comprehension. The next morning, they were having breakfast when Michael's phone chimed with an email notification. The DNA results had arrived days earlier than expected. "Do you want to look?" he asked Sarah. She took a deep breath. "We already know, don't we? But yes, open it." The results confirmed what they'd already accepted. Sarah was Lily's biological mother, with a 99.9% probability match. Seeing it spelled out in clinical, scientific terms somehow made it more real, more undeniable. Michael called Lily to share the news, and she arrived an hour later, her face flushed with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. "So it's official," she said as Sarah showed her the results on Michael's laptop. "Not that I had any doubts after yesterday." "No, me either," Sarah admitted. "But seeing it in black and white—" She trailed off, then gathered herself. "I've been thinking about what happens next. For us, I mean. I'm your biological mother, but I know I'm not your mom. Those were the people who raised you, who loved you, who were there for all the important moments in your life. I don't want to try to replace them." "I wouldn't want that either," Lily said softly. "But maybe we could get to know each other. Build our own relationship, whatever that looks like." Sarah smiled, her first genuine smile since this all began. "I'd like that." The next few days fell into a pattern. Lily would come over after work, and she and Sarah would talk for hours, filling in the blank spaces in each other's lives. Michael often joined them, but sometimes he deliberately gave them privacy, understanding that they needed time to forge their own connection without an audience. He used those hours to do what he did best, investigate. There were still unanswered questions, still pieces of this puzzle that didn't quite fit. How had the Winters managed to pull off such an elaborate deception? Who else had been involved? And what about Kevin Cho, Lily's biological father? A week after their confrontation in Millfield, Michael's research yielded results. Dr. James Harrington, the obstetrician who had delivered Lily, had indeed been a close friend of Robert Winters. He had died 5 years earlier, but his widow was still alive. Michael arranged to interview her, presenting himself as a detective investigating historical medical malpractice cases. Ellen Harrington was in her 70s now, living in a retirement community on the outskirts of the city. She welcomed Michael into her modest apartment, seemingly eager for company. "My husband was a good doctor," she said when Michael broached the subject of ethical violations. "He cared deeply about his patients. Even when those patients were unconscious teenagers whose parents wanted to hide their pregnancies." Michael asked bluntly. Ellen's face paled. How do you know about that? I'm married to Sarah Winters. My name is Michael Reeves. The old woman sank into her chair, her hands trembling. I told James it was wrong. I told him he could lose his license, go to jail even. But Robert had something on him, some financial impropriety years before. He threatened to ruin James if he didn't help. So your husband delivered Sarah's baby while she was heavily sedated, then helped arrange for the child to be adopted without Sarah's knowledge or consent. Ellen nodded, tears in her eyes. It weighed on him for the rest of his life. He drank too much, had nightmares. He never forgave himself. Did he keep records? Michael asked. Documentation of the birth? He destroyed most of it, but Ellen hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. She rose shakily and went to a bookshelf, removing a small locked box from behind a row of medical texts. She unlocked it with a key from her pocket and handed Michael a yellowed envelope. He couldn't bring himself to destroy this. The baby's footprints, a lock of her hair, and a photo. He said someone should have it someday, in case the truth ever came out. Michael opened the envelope with careful fingers. Inside was exactly what Ellen had described. Tiny footprints pressed in ink on hospital cardstock, a small curl of dark hair sealed in plastic, and a Polaroid photograph of a newborn baby. Her eyes squinted against the camera flash. May I take these? He asked. They rightfully belong to Sarah and her daughter. Ellen nodded. I've been keeping them safe all these years, waiting for someone to claim them. I'm glad it's finally over. When Michael returned home with the envelope, he found Sarah and Lily looking through old photo albums. I had no idea you were such a serious child, Lily was saying, laughing at a picture of 8-year-old Sarah with a fierce scowl. You look ready to take on the world. According to my mother, I was stubborn from the womb, Sarah replied, then winced at her unfortunate choice of words. Michael cleared his throat from the doorway and both women looked up. I have something for you both, he said, holding out the envelope. Sarah took it, her brow furrowed in confusion. As she opened it and saw the contents, her hand flew to her mouth. Oh my God, she whispered. Is this Lily's birth records? Michael confirmed. The real ones, not the falsified documents your parents created. Dr. Harrington's widow kept them all these years. Lily moved to Sarah's side, her eyes wide as she looked at the tiny footprints, her footprints, and the lock of baby hair that matched her own dark shade. But it was the photograph that affected her most deeply. That's me, she said in wonder. I've never seen a picture of myself as a newborn. My parents' photo albums only started when I was about 2 weeks old. Sarah traced the image with a gentle finger, tears streaming down her face. You were beautiful, she whispered. So perfect. Michael watched as mother and daughter bent their heads together over this tangible evidence of their connection, this proof that despite everything the Winters had done to separate them, some truths couldn't stay buried forever. And in that moment, looking at Sarah and Lily together, Michael realized something important. This wasn't just Sarah's story anymore, or just Lily's. It was becoming their story, all three of them, a new family forged from secrets and lies but growing now in truth and love. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. There were still wounds to heal, still questions to answer. But watching Sarah and Lily together, bonding over the simplest, most profound connection, a mother seeing her child for the first time, even if decades too late, Michael felt a cautious hope that somehow they would find their way through this together. 2 weeks after finding Lily's birth records, Sarah sat at the kitchen table with her laptop open, a determined look on her face. Michael watched her from the doorway, coffee mug in hand, knowing what was coming before she spoke. I think we should try to find Kevin, she said, looking up at him. Lily's father, He deserves to know. Michael nodded, crossing the room to sit beside her. I've been thinking the same thing. Have you talked to Lily about it? Not yet. I wanted to discuss it with you first. Sarah ran a hand through her hair, a gesture Michael recognized as a sign of her anxiety. What if he doesn't want to know? What if he has a family now, a life that doesn't have room for a surprise daughter? That would be his loss, Michael said simply. But you're right. We should prepare Lily for that possibility. Sarah closed her laptop with a sigh. It's strange. I barely remember Kevin now, just fragments, impressions. My parents did such a thorough job of erasing that part of my life. But when I look at Lily, I see him. The shape of her eyes, the way she tilts her head when she's thinking. It's uncanny. Do you remember anything about his family? Where they might have gone after Millfield? He was an only child, I think. His parents had immigrated from Taiwan a few years before he was born. His father worked in tech, was transferred around a lot. Sarah frowned, concentrating. I think they moved to California after everything. My father mentioned the West Coast when we confronted them. Michael nodded, his detective mind already mapping out search strategies. That gives us something to work with. Do you think it's the right thing to do? Sarah asked suddenly, vulnerability etched across her face. Looking for him? Or should we leave the past in the past? Michael considered her question carefully. I think truth is always better than secrets. We've seen what secrets can do, to you, to Lily. Kevin deserves the same chance you've had, to know the truth and decide what to do with it. Sarah reached for his hand. You're right. I'll talk to Lily when she comes over later. That afternoon, when Lily arrived, Sarah broached the subject of finding Kevin. To her surprise, Lily seemed hesitant. I've thought about it, she admitted, fidgeting with the sleeve of her sweater. But I'm not sure I'm ready. I'm still processing finding you. Adding another biological parent to the mix. It feels overwhelming. Sarah nodded, understanding. We don't have to rush anything. This all happens on your timeline, not mine. It's not that I don't want to know him, Lily clarified. It's just one life-changing revelation at a time, you know? I understand completely, Sarah assured her. Whenever you're ready, if you're ever ready, we'll be here to help. No pressure. Lily's relief was palpable, and Sarah felt a small surge of pride at being able to give her daughter something her own parents never had. The respect of her autonomy, her right to make her own choices about her life. Later that night, after Lily had gone home, Sarah woke from a troubled sleep, gasping for air. Michael was immediately alert beside her, a comforting hand on her back. The dreams again? He asked softly. Sarah nodded, trying to steady her breathing. They're getting more vivid. This time I could hear voices. My mother, a man I think was Dr. Harrington. They were talking about me, about the baby. She won't remember any of this, my mother kept saying. Make sure of it. Michael drew her close, his solid presence an anchor against the tide of recovered memories that threatened to overwhelm her. It's your mind processing, trying to fill in the blanks. It feels so real, Sarah whispered. Like I'm there again, 17 and scared and completely at their mercy. You're not that girl anymore, Michael reminded her gently. You're here. You're safe. And you're in control of your life. Sarah nestled against him, drawing comfort from his warmth. I've been thinking about seeing someone, a therapist who specializes in trauma and recovered memories. I think that's a good idea, Michael said. Whatever you need, I'm behind you 100%. The next morning, Michael called in a favor with a colleague in the department's cyber division. While finding Kevin wasn't an official police matter, Michael's reputation and the unusual circumstances persuaded his colleague to help. I'm not looking for anything that wouldn't be publicly available anyway, Michael explained. Just a current location, contact information if possible. Kevin Cho moved from Millfield to California in the late 90s, his colleague repeated. I'll see what I can find, but no promises. Common name, long time ago. I appreciate it, Dave. I owe you one. You owe me several, but who's counting? Dave laughed. I'll be in touch. Michael spent the rest of the day following up on other leads. He contacted the lawyer who had handled Lily's adoption, only to learn the man had died years ago, and his records had been destroyed in a fire. Another dead end. Meanwhile, Sarah had her first appointment with Dr. Levine, a therapist specializing in trauma and memory recovery. She returned looking drained but resolute. She says what happened to me was a form of medical abuse, Sarah told Michael, her voice flat. Combined with psychological abuse, the gaslighting, the manipulation. She thinks more memories will surface as my brain processes everything, but some details might be lost forever because of the drugs they used. Michael felt a surge of anger at the Winters, at everyone who had participated in the conspiracy to keep Sarah from her child. But he kept his voice gentle. How do you feel about that? Angry, violated, but also relieved, I guess, to have a name for what happened, to know I'm not crazy for not remembering. Sarah sank onto the couch. Dr. Levine says we'll work through it together, at my pace. She also suggested I might want to consider legal action against my parents. Michael sat beside her. Is that something you want to pursue? I don't know. Part of me wants them to face consequences for what they did. But another part just wants to move forward, focus on my relationship with Lily. She leaned against him. What would you do? It's not my decision to make, Michael said carefully. But I think justice matters. What they did was criminal. Not just morally wrong, but actually illegal. Medical fraud, falsifying documents, possibly even kidnapping since they gave away your child without consent. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. I'll think about it, she said finally. The next day, Michael's phone rang. It was Dave from Cyber Division. I found your guy, he said without preamble. Kevin Cho, 52, living in Palo Alto, works as a software architect for Google, married, 2 kids in college. Michael felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. Any contact info? Email, home address, phone number? I'll send everything over. But Mike, Dave hesitated. You might want to approach this carefully. From what I can see, he's got a solid life. This kind of news could hit hard. Understood. Thanks, Dave. I owe you big time. Michael stared at the information on his phone, contemplating the best way to proceed. Should he contact Kevin directly? Have Sarah reach out? Or respect Lily's wish to take things slowly? Before he could decide, his phone rang again. It was Sarah, her voice tight with suppressed emotion. My mother's here, she said without preamble. At the house. She says she needs to talk to us, that it's important. I'm on my way, Michael replied, already heading for his car. Don't let her leave. He found Margaret Winters sitting stiffly in their living room, her designer handbag clutched on her lap like a shield. She looked older than she had 2 weeks ago, the strain of recent events etched into the lines around her mouth and eyes. Detective Reeves, she said formally as he entered. Thank you for coming. Mrs. Winters, he acknowledged coolly, taking a seat beside Sarah on the couch. What's so important that you needed to show up unannounced? Margaret winced at his tone but straightened her shoulders. I've come to give Sarah something I should have given her years ago. She reached into her handbag and withdrew a small leather-bound journal. Your diary, from that summer. Sarah stared at the journal as if it might bite her. My diary? You kept it all these years? Your father wanted to destroy it, Margaret said quietly. But I couldn't. I told myself I was saving it for when you were older, when you might be ready to know the truth. But the years passed, and it was easier to maintain the lie than face what we'd done. Sarah took the journal with trembling hands. Why now? Because I've lost you, Margaret said simply, her composure cracking. Because what we did was unforgivable, and I know that now. Because this belongs to you, not to me. Michael watched his mother-in-law carefully, skeptical of her sudden change of heart. Is Robert aware you're here? Margaret shook her head. No. He still believes we did the right thing. He can't accept that we were wrong, that we hurt our daughter in ways that can never be repaired. She looked at Sarah, tears spilling down her cheeks. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to have this piece of yourself back. Sarah held the journal like it was made of glass, her expression unreadable. Thank you for bringing this, she said finally, her voice distant. But it doesn't change anything between us. Margaret nodded, brushing away her tears with a manicured hand. I understand. I'll go now. But Sarah, if you ever want to talk, if you ever have questions I can answer, I'll let you know, Sarah said, not unkindly but with finality. After Margaret left, Sarah sat with the journal in her lap, not opening it. I'm afraid to read it, she admitted to Michael. Afraid of what I'll find, of the girl I was then. You don't have to read it now, Michael assured her. Or ever if you don't want to. It's your choice. Sarah traced the worn leather cover with her fingertips. No, I need to know. I need to remember. She took a deep breath. But first, I think we should call Lily. She should be here for this if she wants to be. An hour later, the three of them sat around the kitchen table, the closed journal between them. Lily looked both nervous and curious. Are you sure you want me here for this? She asked Sarah. These are your private thoughts. You're part of this story, Sarah said simply. You have as much right to know as I do. With a deep breath, Sarah opened the journal to the first page, dated June 15, 1999. Her handwriting was rounder than, girlish, with small hearts dotting the eyes. Dear Diary, she read aloud, her voice steady despite the emotion in her eyes. Mom and Dad are sending me to Aunt Catherine's for the summer. They say it's because I need to focus on preparing for college applications, but I know the real reason. They found out about me and Kevin, about everything. Sarah turned the page, continuing to read as her 17-year-old self poured out her heart about her first love, her fears for the future, and the growing realization that she was pregnant. The entries grew more scattered as the summer progressed, reflecting her increasing isolation and her parents' mounting pressure. The final entry was dated August 30th, 1999, just days before Lily would have been born. It was shorter than the others, the handwriting shaky. Something's wrong. I don't feel right. Aunt Catherine keeps giving me pills that make me sleepy. Mom and Dad are coming tomorrow. They say everything will be taken care of, that no one will ever know. But I'll know. I'll always know about my baby. And somehow, someday, I'll find a way to make things right. The journal ended there. Sarah closed it gently, tears streaming down her face. Lily reached across the table and took her hand, her own eyes wet. You tried to fight them, Lily said softly. Even then, even at 17, you tried to protect me. Sarah nodded, unable to speak through her tears. Michael put his arm around her shoulders, providing silent support as she absorbed the impact of her own words, written so long ago and then stolen from her memory. In that moment, surrounded by the truth finally laid bare, they all understood that finding Kevin Cho wasn't just about completing their picture of the past. It was about honoring the promise a 17-year-old girl had made to her unborn child, a promise to make things right. The discovery of Sarah's diary changed everything. Reading those pages, the thoughts and fears of her 17-year-old self had unlocked something in Sarah's mind. Memories came flooding back, no longer in fragments but in vivid, painful detail. Her morning sickness, the way her mother watched her eat, Kevin's worried face the last time she saw him, not knowing it would be the final time, her aunt's cold efficiency as she administered the pills that kept Sarah compliant and confused. "I want to contact Kevin," Sarah announced 3 days after reading the diary. She was sitting in the backyard with Michael and Lily, the evening air mild around them. "I need to." Lily looked up from her iced tea, her expression cautious. "Are you sure? You don't have to do this for me. I meant what I said about taking things slowly." "I'm not doing it just for you," Sarah replied. "I'm doing it for me too, and for Kevin. My parents stole his child from him just as much as they stole you from me. He deserves to know." Michael studied his wife's face, noting the determination there. She was healing, finding her strength. "I have his contact information," he admitted. "Dave found him." Sarah turned to him, surprise and hope mingling in her expression. "You do? Where is he?" "Palo Alto, working for Google. He's married with 2 kids in college." A shadow crossed Sarah's face. "He has a family, a whole life." "So do we," Michael reminded her gently. "Finding out about Lily hasn't made me love you any less. It's just changed the shape of our family." "But what if his wife doesn't see it that way? What if we're disrupting his life, his marriage?" Lily fidgeted with her glass. "Maybe we should consider what this will mean for everyone involved before we do anything." Sarah took a deep breath. "You're right, both of you. We need to be thoughtful about this." She looked at Lily. "I won't contact him without your blessing. This affects you most of all." Lily considered for a moment, then nodded slowly. I think he should know. But maybe we should start with an email. Something less invasive than a phone call or showing up at his house." "That's smart," Michael agreed. "Give him the information, let him decide how to respond." Over the next few days, they crafted the email together, carefully considering every word. Should they include photos? How much detail should they provide about the circumstances of Lily's birth? What tone should they strike? Factual, emotional, apologetic? In the end, they kept it simple. "Dear Kevin, my name is Sarah Winters Reeves. We dated in high school in Millfield until the summer of 1999 when my parents sent me away. I'm reaching out because I recently discovered something that affects both of us. I learned that I was pregnant when I left Millfield that summer. My parents kept this from me, arranging for me to be heavily sedated during delivery and placing our baby for adoption without my knowledge or consent. I only discovered this recently when our daughter found me. Her name is Lily Chen. She's 23 years old, graduated from UC Berkeley, and works as a graphic designer. She was raised by loving adoptive parents who have since passed away. I don't expect anything from you, and I understand this news may come as a tremendous shock. I'm only contacting you because I believe you have a right to know. If you would like more information or would like to be in contact with Lily, we would welcome that. If not, we understand and will respect your privacy. Sincerely, Sarah. She included her phone number and email address, but no pictures. Those could come later if Kevin wanted them. Are you ready? Michael asked as Sarah's finger hovered over the send button. Lily stood beside her, her hand on Sarah's shoulder. Yes, Sarah said, and clicked send. The waiting was excruciating. Sarah jumped every time her phone chimed with a notification. Lily tried to distract herself with work but found herself checking her own email compulsively. Michael watched them both with concern, wishing he could shield them from potential disappointment, but knowing this was something they had to face together. 3 days passed with no response, then 4. On the 5th day, Sarah began to lose hope. "Maybe he doesn't check that email account anymore," she said as she and Michael prepared dinner. "Or maybe he saw it and decided he wants nothing to do with us. I wouldn't blame him." "Give it time," Michael advised. "This is life-changing news. He might need space to process it." On the 7th day, Sarah's phone rang with an unknown number. She answered it with trembling hands, stepping onto the back porch for privacy. When she returned 20 minutes later, her eyes were red, but a smile trembled on her lips. "That was Kevin," she said. "He got my email. He wants to meet Lily. And me." Kevin suggested a neutral location, a quiet restaurant halfway between their cities. The week until their meeting crawled by, each day stretching with anticipation and anxiety. "What if he doesn't like me?" Lily fretted the night before, sitting at Sarah and Michael's kitchen table. "What if he regrets finding out about me?" "That's not possible," Sarah assured her. "You're amazing. He'll see that immediately." "Did he sound angry about what happened?" Lily asked. Sarah considered the question. "Not angry, stunned, sad, a little disbelieving at first. But once I explained everything, he seemed determined, like he needed to see for himself." Michael, watching them from the doorway, thought about Kevin Cho, a man whose life was about to change forever, just as theirs had. He wondered if Kevin's wife knew about the meeting, if he had told his other children about their half-sister. So many variables, so many ways this meeting could unfold. The restaurant Kevin chose was a small Italian place with private booths and subdued lighting. Sarah spotted him as soon as they walked in. Older, of course, his hair streaked with silver, but with the same thoughtful eyes she remembered from her youth. Eyes that Lily had inherited. He stood when he saw them, his gaze moving from Sarah to Lily, lingering there with undisguised wonder. "Hi," he said simply, his voice thick with emotion. Lily stepped forward, offering her hand. "Hello, I'm Lily." Instead of taking her hand, Kevin reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He tapped the screen a few times, then turned it to show them. On the screen was a photo of a teenage girl with Lily's eyes and smile. "This is my daughter, Maya. She's a freshman at Stanford." He swiped to another photo. "And this is my son, Ethan. He's at UCLA." Another swipe. "And this is my wife, Jennifer. We've been married for 20 years. He paused, looking directly at Lily. "They all know about you. They all want to meet you when you're ready." Lily's eyes filled with tears. "They do?" Kevin nodded, his own eyes wet. "Family is everything to us, your family." The dinner that followed was surreal, a blend of the mundane and the profound. They ordered food they barely tasted, made small talk that kept veering into deeper waters. Kevin had brought photos of his children growing up, eager to share them with Lily. She, in turn, showed him pictures of her childhood, her adoptive parents, her college graduation. Sarah watched them with a mixture of joy and grief. Joy at seeing Lily connect with her biological father. Grief for all the years lost, all the milestones missed. Kevin seemed to sense her thoughts. "It wasn't your fault," he said quietly while Lily was in the restroom. "None of this was your fault." "It wasn't yours either," Sarah replied. Did you ever suspect?" Kevin shook his head. "Your parents told everyone you'd met someone new at your aunt's, that you weren't coming back to Millfield. I tried calling, writing, but everything came back unopened. Eventually, I had to accept it was over." He paused. "If I had known, I would have moved heaven and earth to find you both." When Lily returned, Kevin asked the question they'd all been avoiding. "What happens now? Where do we go from here?" Lily glanced at Sarah, then back at Kevin. "I'd like to get to know you, and your family, if that's okay." but I understand if you need time, or if it's complicated with your wife and kids." Kevin shook his head firmly. "Jennifer is the one who insisted I come tonight. She said if it were our kids, she'd want whoever found them to reach out to give us the chance to know them." He smiled slightly. Maya and Ethan are beside themselves with excitement about having an older sister. They've been texting me all night asking how it's going. The tension that had gripped them all began to ease. They weren't strangers forcing their way into Kevin's life. They were being welcomed, embraced even. As the evening wound down, Kevin extended an invitation. "Jennifer and I would love to have all of you over for dinner next weekend, including your husband Sarah. Michael, right?" Sarah nodded, surprised and touched by the inclusion. "We'd like that." Outside the restaurant, as they prepared to part ways, Kevin hesitated, then asked the question that had clearly been weighing on him all night. "Your parents, have there been any consequences for what they did?" Sarah exchanged a glance with Michael. "Not yet, but I've been talking with a lawyer about options. Criminal charges might be difficult after so much time, but there could be a civil case." Kevin's expression hardened. "They stole our child from us. They drugged you. They lied to everyone. They should face justice." "I agree," Sarah said quietly. "But I'm not doing it for revenge. I'm doing it so they can't pretend anymore, so the truth is acknowledged." Kevin nodded in understanding. Then hesitantly, he opened his arms to Lily. "Is it too soon for a hug?" In answer, Lily stepped into his embrace. Sarah watched, tears streaming down her face, as father and daughter held each other for the first time in 23 years. Later, driving home with Michael while Lily followed in her own car, Sarah was quiet, processing everything that had happened. "You okay?" Michael asked, reaching for her hand across the console. "Better than okay," Sarah replied, squeezing his fingers. "For the first time since this all started, I feel like maybe something good can come from all the lies and pain. Seeing Kevin with Lily, it was like watching a missing piece fall into place." Michael nodded. "The way he included all of us, not just Lily. That says a lot about him." "He was always kind," Sarah said softly. "That's what drew me to him back then. He was gentle and thoughtful in a way most teenage boys aren't." She smiled faintly. "I'm glad Lily has some of that in her DNA." As they pulled into their driveway, Sarah's phone pinged with a text. It was a group message from Kevin to both her and Lily, a selfie of him with Jennifer, Maya, and Ethan, all smiling broadly, with the caption, "Your extended family can't wait to meet you." Sarah showed the phone to Michael, her heart full. "Look at what we've found," she whispered. "No," Michael corrected gently. "Look at what found you." The drive to Palo Alto the following weekend felt like crossing some invisible threshold. As Michael navigated the highway with Sarah beside him and Lily following in her car, he couldn't help but reflect on how quickly their lives had transformed. Just a month ago, they had been a couple, comfortable in their routines, with no idea that their entire world was about to shift on its axis. Now they were on their way to have dinner with a family that was both strange and familiar, connected to them through bonds of blood and shared history that had been buried for decades. Kevin and Jennifer's home was a comfortable two-story in a quiet neighborhood of well-established trees and manicured lawns. As they pulled into the driveway, the front door opened, and Kevin emerged, followed by a petite woman with warm eyes and a ready smile, Jennifer clearly, and two young adults who were unmistakably their children. "They all came out to greet us," Sarah murmured, her voice tight with emotion. "The whole family." Michael squeezed her hand. "Our family now, too." The introductions on the front lawn were a blur of smiles and handshakes that quickly gave way to hugs. Maya, 19 and vibrant, threw her arms around Lily with the enthusiasm of someone who had always wanted a big sister. Ethan, 21 and more reserved, hung back slightly but offered a genuine smile and a This is pretty cool, actually. Jennifer embraced Sarah with surprising warmth. Thank you for finding the courage to reach out, she said quietly. Our family is richer for having you all in it. Dinner was a lively affair, the initial awkwardness dissolving as Maya peppered Lily with questions about college and career choices, while Ethan discovered they shared a passion for obscure indie bands. Kevin and Sarah exchanged glances across the table, their expressions a mixture of wonder and lingering sadness for all the years lost. Mom says I have your eyes, Maya told Lily during a lull in conversation. Do you see it? Lily studied the younger girl's face, recognition dawning. Yeah, I do. Same shape, same crinkle when you smile. She turned to Ethan. You have them too, but your smile is all Jennifer's. Kevin showed me pictures of you when you were little. Sarah told Maya and Ethan. You were adorable, both of you. Dad has a whole album labeled Kids on his phone, Maya said with an eye roll. He's that parent. Always has been, Jennifer confirmed with affectionate exasperation. You should have seen him when they were babies. Every milestone, every cute outfit, all documented extensively. The comment hung in the air for a moment, everyone aware of the unspoken contrast. The milestones of Lily's life that Kevin had never witnessed. The moments stolen from him, just as surely as they had been stolen from Sarah. Sensing the shift in mood, Michael stepped in. I'd love to see those photos sometime. I'm building quite a collection of embarrassing stories about Lily already, but visual evidence would really take it to the next level. Lily groaned dramatically. It too, Michael. I thought we were on the same team. The tension broke, laughter rippling around the table. But later, as Jennifer served coffee and dessert in the living room, Kevin broached the subject they had all been dancing around. Sarah mentioned you're considering legal action against your parents, he said, his tone careful, but his eyes determined. I want you to know I fully support that. Whatever you decide, whatever you need, I'm there. Sarah set down her coffee cup. My lawyer says a civil case is our best option. The statute of limitations has expired for most criminal charges, unfortunately. What would a civil case mean exactly? Jennifer asked. We'd be suing them for damages, emotional distress, medical malpractice, fraudulent adoption procedures, Michael explained. It would be public, potentially messy. Sarah's parents have a lot to lose in terms of reputation, standing in the community. Good, Kevin said flatly. They should lose those things. They've been living a lie for over 2 decades. Dad, Ethan cautioned, glancing at Lily. It's okay, Lily assured him. I understand why he feels that way. She turned to Sarah. But what about you? Are you ready for what a lawsuit might mean? The publicity, the stress? Sarah was quiet for a moment. I keep thinking about that diary entry, my 17-year-old self promising to make things right someday. I couldn't do it then. I didn't even remember to try, but I can do it now. She took a deep breath. I'm not just doing this for me or for you or for Kevin. I'm doing it for that scared teenager who had her autonomy, her memory, and her child stolen from her. The room fell silent, the weight of her words settling over them all. Then Maya, her young face solemn with understanding beyond her years, said simply, Then we'll all be there with you. Every step. The drive home that night was quiet, each of them processing the evening in their own way. Lily had stayed behind for a while longer, wanting additional time with her newfound siblings, promising to text when she headed home. They're good people, Michael said as they turned onto the highway. All of them. Sarah nodded, her gaze fixed on the road ahead. I keep thinking about how different things could have been. If my parents hadn't interfered, if Kevin and I had raised Lily together. She shook her head. But then I think about Jennifer and Maya and Ethan, about you. None of you would be in my life the way you are now." "Life has a strange way of circling back," Michael observed. "The connections we were meant to have finding us eventually." Sarah reached for his hand. "I couldn't do any of this without you, you know. Finding Lily, reconnecting with Kevin, pursuing the lawsuit, all of it would be so much harder alone." "You'd manage," Michael said with confidence. "You're stronger than you know, but I'm glad I'm here for it. Glad to be part of this story." The next week brought a flurry of activity. Sarah met again with her lawyer, Diane Hoffman, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s who specialized in family law and complex civil cases. "The good news is we have substantial evidence," Diane explained as she reviewed their case notes. "The altered medical records, the diary, Dr. Harrington's widow's testimony, and of course the DNA confirmation of your relationship with Lily. The bad news is that cases like this, with events so far in the past, can be challenging to litigate." "What kind of damages could we expect?" Michael asked. "That's difficult to predict. Financial compensation would be one component, covering therapy costs, emotional distress, possibly even lost income opportunities related to the trauma, but I get the sense that's not your primary concern." She looked to Sarah for confirmation. "No," Sarah agreed. "I want accountability. I want my parents to admit publicly what they did. I want them to face consequences, even if those consequences are primarily to their reputation and social standing." Diane nodded. "Then we should focus on crafting a case that lays out the full extent of their actions, one that's difficult for them to settle quietly. Are you prepared for that? For the media attention it might attract, the public scrutiny?" Sarah hesitated, then nodded. "I am. But I want to make sure Lily and Kevin are protected as much as possible. This isn't their fight, not really." "I think you'll find they consider it very much their fight," Michael said gently. As if to prove his point, both Lily and Kevin insisted on being present when the lawsuit was filed the following week. They stood flanking Sarah outside the courthouse, a unified front as photographers from the local press captured images that would soon spread through the community like wildfire. "Prominent attorney and wife sued by daughter for illegal adoption scheme," the headline in the Millfield Gazette read the next day. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Sarah's phone rang constantly with calls from old friends, distant relatives, former classmates, all expressing shock, sympathy, or in some cases, disbelief. "Your parents? But they're such upstanding members of the community," was a common refrain. Even more disturbing were the calls from other women who had attended the same private clinic where Sarah had given birth. Women who had foggy memories of procedures, who had been told they'd had complications requiring sedation, who had gaps in their recollections that had always bothered them. "It might be bigger than just your case," Diane warned during a strategy session. "Dr. Harrington's practice might have been involved in multiple situations like yours. Are you prepared for this to potentially expand into a larger investigation?" Sarah looked at Michael, then at Lily and Kevin, who had become fixtures at these meetings. "If there are other women, other families who were separated the way we were, they deserve justice too." 3 days after the lawsuit was filed, Robert Winters held a press conference on the steps of his law firm. Flanked by his own attorneys, he read a prepared statement categorically denying all allegations. "These outrageous claims are the product of recovered memory therapy, a discredited practice known to implant false memories," he stated, his voice steady but his eyes avoiding the cameras. "My wife and I have always acted with our daughter's best interests at heart. We look forward to clearing our names in court." Margaret Winters was noticeably absent from the press conference. That evening, as Sarah, Michael, and Lily watched the recording together, Sarah's phone rang with a number she didn't recognize. "Sarah, it's me, Margaret." Her mother's voice sounded smaller than Sarah had ever heard it, lacking its usual crisp authority. "Mom," Sarah acknowledged, putting the phone on speaker so Michael and Lily could hear. I saw Dad's press conference. I wasn't there, Margaret said quickly. I couldn't do it. I couldn't stand next to him and lie, not anymore. Sarah's breath caught. What are you saying? I'm saying I'm tired of the lies. I've been living with them for 23 years and I can't do it anymore. Margaret's voice broke. Your father still believes we did the right thing. He won't admit otherwise, not even to himself, but I need to make this right, Sarah, whatever that means. The implications of her mother's words hung in the air. Beside Sarah, Michael leaned forward, his detective's instincts activated. Mrs. Winters, are you saying you're willing to testify? To tell the truth about what happened? A pause, then. Yes, I am. For Sarah, for Lily, for that poor boy who never knew he had a daughter. Another pause. For myself, too. I need to be able to look in the mirror again. After the call ended, the three of them sat in stunned silence. Your mother, Lily said finally, would be turning state's evidence against your father. Essentially, Michael agreed. Her testimony would be damning. She was there for everything, participated in it all. Sarah's mind was spinning. I never imagined she would choose me over him. Not after all these years. Maybe she's not choosing you over him, Lily suggested quietly. Maybe she's just choosing the truth, finally. Sarah looked at her daughter, this wise, compassionate young woman who had come into their lives like a whirlwind and changed everything, and felt a surge of pride so powerful it brought tears to her eyes. We need to call Diane, Michael said, already reaching for his phone. And Kevin. This changes everything. Sarah nodded, but her eyes remained on Lily. Are you okay with this? With your grandmother potentially testifying against your grandfather? Lily considered the question carefully. I don't think of them as my grandparents, not really. They're the people who kept me from my parents, who drugged you and lied to everyone. If she wants to tell the truth now, she shrugged. It's about 23 years too late, but it's better than never. Margaret's decision to break ranks with her husband would indeed change everything, for the lawsuit, for the family, for the chance at justice so long denied. But as Sarah reached for Lily's hand, she knew the most important change had already happened. The truth, buried for so long, had finally found its way into the light. Margaret Winters arrived at Diane Hoffman's law office exactly on time, dressed in a conservative navy suit that did little to disguise how much weight she had lost in the weeks since the lawsuit was filed. Her normally perfect hair showed strands of gray she had stopped coloring, and her hands trembled slightly as she set her purse on the conference room table. Thank you for meeting with us, Diane said, gesturing for Margaret to take a seat. Sarah sat across from her mother, Michael beside her. Lily had chosen not to attend, feeling the conversation would be difficult enough without her presence adding pressure. I wasn't sure you'd come, Sarah admitted. Margaret's lips tightened. Your father doesn't know I'm here. He thinks I'm at my weekly bridge game. A flash of the old Margaret, the woman who managed appearances, who kept up pretenses, but something had changed. There was a brittleness to her now, a fragility that hadn't been there before. Mrs. Winters, Diane began, I want to be very clear about what your testimony would mean. You would be providing evidence against your husband, evidence that could result in significant financial penalties and potentially even criminal charges if the statute of limitations can be overcome. Margaret nodded. I understand. You'll also be admitting to your own involvement in these events, Diane continued. While your cooperation would be taken into consideration, you yourself could face consequences. I accept that, Margaret said quietly. I deserve that. Sarah studied her mother, searching for signs of the calculating woman who had orchestrated the cover-up of her pregnancy and the theft of her child. Instead, she saw someone broken, someone who had finally buckled under the weight of decades of deception. "Why now?" Sarah asked, the question that had been burning inside her since her mother's call. "After all these years, all the lies, why are you willing to tell the truth now?" Margaret's eyes, so like Sarah's own, filled with tears. "Because I see what we took from you, from Lily, from Kevin. It wasn't just a baby we took, it was a lifetime of memories, of connections." She looked down at her hands. "And because I can't bear another day of pretending what we did was right." "You pretended for 23 years, Sarah pointed out, unable to keep the bitterness from her voice. "Yes," Margaret acknowledged. "It got easier with time, the lying. We convinced ourselves we had saved you, given you a better life than you would have had as a teenage mother." A single tear slid down her cheek. "But then I saw you with Lily. I saw how you looked at her. And I knew that nothing, no college degree, no career achievement, no socially advantageous marriage, could ever compensate for what we stole from you both." The room fell silent. Michael reached under the table to squeeze Sarah's hand, offering silent support. "What about Dad?" Sarah asked finally. "He's still denying everything." Margaret sighed. "Robert believes his own lies now. He's convinced himself we did the right thing, the only thing. He can't face the alternative, that he irreparably harmed his own child for the sake of appearances." "And you?" Michael asked. "How do you live with it?" "Poorly," Margaret admitted. "I haven't slept through the night in years. I drink too much wine with dinner. I take pills to function during the day." She met Sarah's gaze directly. "I'm not asking for sympathy, I'm just telling you the truth, finally." Diane leaned forward. "Mrs. Winters, we need to discuss specifically what you're prepared to testify to. The timeline of events, the decisions made, who else was involved." Margaret nodded, straightening her shoulders. "Ask your questions. I'll answer everything." For the next 2 hours, Margaret methodically detailed the conspiracy that had altered so many lives. She named names, doctors, nurses, administrators, and family friends who had helped conceal Sarah's pregnancy. She described the private maternity facility where Sarah had been kept in the final weeks, the medications administered without her knowledge, the elaborate story concocted to explain her absence. Dr. Harrington wasn't the only doctor involved in these arrangements, Margaret revealed. There was an entire network. Robert handled legal matters for several physicians, and in return they provided services. She swallowed hard. "You weren't the only girl, Sarah. There were others. Daughters of judges, business leaders, politicians, anyone with enough money and influence to make a problem disappear." Diane's pen paused over her legal pad. "How many others?" "I don't know for certain. A dozen, maybe more. Just during the years Robert and I were involved, the facility had been operating for decades." Sarah felt physically ill. "All those women, all those babies." Margaret nodded miserably. "It was considered a service, if you can believe that. Saving young women from ruining their lives, providing childless couples with babies. Everyone won, except, of course, the mothers who had no choice in the matter." As the interview concluded, Margaret reached into her purse and withdrew a small flash drive. "I've compiled documents, financial records, correspondence, the contract with the adoption broker who placed Lily. Robert doesn't know I kept copies." She placed it on the table. "It's all here." Diane took the drive, her expression grave. "This could be crucial evidence, Mrs. Winters, not just for Sarah's case, but potentially for others." Margaret rose to leave, then hesitated, turning to Sarah. "I know I have no right to ask anything of you, but if you can find it in your heart to let me know Lily a little someday." She trailed off, not finishing the request. Sarah didn't respond immediately. The anger she had carried for weeks hadn't disappeared, but it had shifted somehow, become more focused on the system that had enabled her parents rather than just on her parents themselves. "I can't make any promises," she said finally. "That's Lily's decision too. But I won't stand in the way if she ever wants to know you." It was a small concession, less than forgiveness, but more than rejection. Margaret nodded once, accepting it for the limited olive branch it was, and left. "Well," Diane said into the silence that followed, "this changes everything. With Margaret's testimony and documentation, we have a much stronger case, not just against your parents, but potentially against the entire network she described." Michael, ever the detective, was already thinking ahead. "We need to identify those other women, those other families. They deserve to know what happened to them." Sarah nodded, still processing the scale of the conspiracy her mother had revealed. "Where do we even start?" "With the evidence Margaret just gave us," Diane replied, holding up the flash drive. "And with the media, this story is about to get much, much bigger." Diane's prediction proved accurate. Within days of their meeting with Margaret, the case exploded from a local scandal to a national news story. "Baby trafficking ring catering to elite families exposed," screamed headlines across the country. Reporters descended on Millfield, digging into the town's secrets, identifying other families potentially involved. The pressure proved too much for Robert Winters. 3 days after Margaret's evidence became public, he suffered a massive heart attack while preparing for a television interview. He survived, but his hospitalization temporarily halted the legal proceedings. "Dad's lawyer called," Sarah told Michael as they prepared dinner one evening. "They want to settle quietly, of course. They're offering a substantial sum." Michael paused in chopping vegetables. "What did Diane say?" "She said it's my decision. Taking the settlement would mean no public trial, no testimony. The evidence would be sealed." Sarah sighed. "But it would also mean a faster resolution, less stress for everyone." "Including your father," Michael noted. "Yes." Sarah's expression was complicated. "I don't wish him ill, Michael. Despite everything, he's still my father." "What about the other families? The other women who were drugged and had their babies taken?" It was the central question, the one Sarah had been wrestling with since Margaret's revelations. Her own justice versus the potential for a broader reckoning that might help others. "I told Diane I need to discuss it with Lily and Kevin before making a decision," Sarah said. "This affects all of us." The discussion took place that weekend at Kevin and Jennifer's home, which had become a regular gathering place for their blended family. Maya had baked cookies, and Ethan had set up a playlist of mellow background music, both attempting to soften the gravity of the conversation to come. "A settlement would give us closure faster," Sarah explained after laying out the options. "We could put this behind us, move forward with our lives without the stress of a trial." "But," Kevin prompted, sensing her hesitation, "but it would mean the full truth never comes to light. The other victims might never know what happened to them." Sarah looked around the room, meeting each person's eyes. "I need to know what you all think. This isn't just my decision," Kevin spoke first. "I lost 23 years with my daughter. No amount of money can compensate for that. But if going to trial means other families might find each other, might get answers." He shook his head. "I can't in good conscience vote for a settlement that silences those stories." Jennifer reached for his hand. "I agree. This is bigger than just our family now." All eyes turned to Lily, who had been uncharacteristically quiet. "I keep thinking about my adoptive parents," she said finally. "They died never knowing they'd been part of something so wrong. They believed they had adopted me legally, ethically." She looked up at Sarah. "I think we need to see this through. Not just for us, but for everyone who was hurt by this system." Michael nodded his agreement. "The detective in me says follow the evidence wherever it leads." The human in me says the same. Sarah looked at the faces of her family, her husband, her daughter's father, and his family, who had become her extended family too, and felt a surge of gratitude for their unity, their shared commitment to truth. "Then we keep going," she said. "No settlement. We take this to trial." The decision made, they moved on to lighter topics, but the weight of what lay ahead remained with them all. In the kitchen later, helping Jennifer with the dishes, Sarah found herself asking a question that had been on her mind. "Does it bother you, having me in your life and Kevin's life? Having this whole complicated history suddenly thrust upon you?" Jennifer considered the question, her hands stilling in the soapy water. "When Kevin first told me about your email, about Lily, I was shocked, terrified, honestly. I wondered if it would change everything, if his feelings for you might resurface." She smiled ruefully. "But then I saw you all together, you, Lily, Michael. I saw how much Michael loves you, how supportive he is. And I realized this isn't a threat to my marriage or my family, it's an expansion of it. You're a remarkable woman," Sarah said softly. "Not everyone would be so gracious." Jennifer shrugged. "Life throws curveballs. You either dodge them or learn to catch." She passed Sarah a plate to dry. "Besides, Maya and Ethan adore Lily, and I like you and Michael. Our Sunday dinners have become the highlight of my week." Sarah smiled, feeling a sense of peace, despite the legal battle looming ahead. Whatever happened in court, they had already won something precious. A family, bound not by conventional ties but by choice, by truth, and by the shared experience of finding each other against all odds. As she rejoined the others in the living room, watching Lily laugh at something Ethan had said, Sarah felt certain they had made the right decision. The truth, no matter how painful, deserved to be told. Not just for their sake, but for all those still searching for answers, for connections, for the missing pieces of their lives. The Millfield County Courthouse stood as a monument to justice, or at least the appearance of it. Marble columns, intricately carved wooden panels, and solemn portraits of judges past created an atmosphere of gravitas and tradition. It was here, in Courtroom 3, that the case of Reeves versus Winters would begin. Sarah sat at the plaintiff's table with Diane, her posture straight but her hands restless in her lap. Michael, Lily, Kevin, and Jennifer occupied the first row of seats behind her, a united front of support. On the defense side, Robert Winters sat alone with his attorney, a distinguished silver-haired man known for handling high-profile cases. Margaret's absence was conspicuous. She would be appearing as a witness for the plaintiff, a fact that had drawn gasps when Diane had filed her witness list. "All rise for the Honorable Judge Elaine Matsuda," the bailiff called, and the courtroom stood as a stern-faced woman in her 60s took her place on the bench. The proceedings began with opening statements, Diane laying out in clear, compelling terms the story of deception and exploitation that had robbed Sarah of her child and Lily of her mother. The defense countered with arguments about parental authority, statutes of limitations, and the questionable nature of recovered memories. Ms. Hoffman's dramatic tale fails to acknowledge a simple truth, Robert's attorney intoned. "My client and his wife made a difficult decision to protect their minor daughter from the life-altering consequences of a teenage pregnancy. That such decisions would be second-guessed decades later, based on memories recovered through suggestive therapy, sets a dangerous precedent for every parent who has had to make hard choices for their child's welfare." Sarah felt a surge of anger at the mischaracterization of her therapy, the implication that her memories were somehow manufactured. But Diane had prepared her for this line of attack. "Remember," she had counseled, "they'll try to make this about you, about your credibility. But we have evidence they can't explain away. The DNA match, your mother's testimony, the medical records. Stay focused on the facts. The first day ended with procedural matters, and Sarah left the courthouse feeling drained but resolute. Outside, a small crowd of reporters called questions, but Michael skillfully guided her through them to where Kevin waited with the car. "I never imagined we'd be here," Sarah said as they drove away from the courthouse. "When I was 17, I couldn't have conceived of taking my parents to court." "You're not that scared teenager anymore," Michael reminded her. "You're a woman fighting for justice, not just for yourself, but for others." That night, unable to sleep, Sarah found herself in the kitchen making tea. Lily, who had been staying with them since the trial began, joined her a few minutes later. "I saw Grandpa watching me in court today," Lily said quietly, the word Grandpa sounding strange on her lips. "He kept staring at me like he was trying to find something familiar." Sarah's hands tightened around her mug. "Does that bother you?" Lily considered the question. "Not really. I'm curious about him in an abstract way, but I don't feel any connection. Not like with Grandma Margaret, who at least seems sorry for what she did." The distinction between her parents, her father's continued defiance versus her mother's remorse, had been weighing on Sarah's mind as well. "I keep wondering if Dad will ever admit what he did was wrong." "Does it matter?" Lily asked. "Whether he admits it or not, we know the truth." Sarah smiled faintly. "When did you get so wise?" "Must be genetic," Lily replied with a small grin. "From my mother's side, obviously." The moment of levity was brief but precious, a reminder that amid the legal battles and painful revelations, they were building something new and beautiful, a relationship based on truth and mutual respect. The second day of the trial brought Margaret Winters to the stand. She entered the courtroom with her head held high, though her eyes darted nervously to where Robert sat. He refused to look at her, his face a mask of stony indifference. Under Diane's careful questioning, Margaret recounted the events of the summer of 1999. Her voice, initially tentative, grew steadier as she described the elaborate deception orchestrated to hide Sarah's pregnancy, the fake story about appendicitis, the private facility disguised as a recuperation center, the doctors paid to administer sedatives and later to falsify medical records. "Did Sarah ever consent to placing her child for adoption?" Diane asked. "No," Margaret replied without hesitation. "She was never given the opportunity to consent. She was deliberately kept unaware of the birth through medication." "And Mr. Winters' role in this?" Margaret glanced at her husband. "It was primarily Robert's plan. He made the arrangements, contacted the doctors, handled the legal paperwork for the adoption. He told me it was for Sarah's own good, that no daughter of his would be a teenage mother." The cross-examination was grueling. Robert's attorney attacked Margaret's credibility, suggesting she was testifying against her husband out of spite, implying she had her own agenda. Margaret remained composed, though her hands trembled on the witness stand. "Mrs. Winters," the defense attorney said silkily, "isn't it true that you're currently separated from your husband and pursuing a divorce?" "Objection," Diane called. "Relevance." "Goes to bias, Your Honor," the defense countered. Judge Matsuda considered. "I'll allow it, but tread carefully, counsel." Margaret straightened her shoulders. "Yes, I filed for divorce, but that has nothing to do with my testimony today. I'm here because I can no longer live with the lies we told." Over the next several days, a parade of witnesses took the stand. Dr. Harrington's widow, nurses who had worked at the private facility, even a clerk who had processed the falsified adoption papers. The picture they painted was damning, a systematic operation designed to hide embarrassing pregnancies and supply babies to wealthy couples willing to pay for a quick, quiet adoption. Most powerful was the testimony of a woman named Claire Phillips, who had come forward after reading about the case. Like Sarah, She had been sent away by her prominent family after becoming pregnant at 16, only to be told later she had undergone emergency surgery for an ovarian cyst. "I always felt there was something more," Claire testified, tears streaming down her face. "Something they weren't telling me. I had dreams about a baby crying, would wake up in the middle of the night with my arms reaching for something. When I saw Sarah's story in the news, everything clicked into place." A DNA test had confirmed that Claire was the biological mother of a 30-year-old man living in Oregon who had been searching for his birth mother for over a decade. By the end of the first week, 3 more women had come forward with similar stories, all connected to the same network of doctors and lawyers that had handled Sarah's case. What had begun as one family's quest for truth was rapidly expanding into a class action lawsuit, with Diane at the helm. On the 8th day of the trial, Robert Winters finally took the stand. Unlike Margaret, whose testimony had been marked by regret and remorse, Robert was defiant, unapologetic. "I did what any father would do," he stated flatly. "My 17-year-old daughter was involved with a boy going nowhere, facing a pregnancy that would have derailed her entire future. As her parent, it was my legal and moral duty to make decisions in her best interest. And those decisions included drugging her without her knowledge?" Diane asked sharply. "Medical sedation was necessary for her emotional well-being," Robert replied smoothly. "Sarah was distraught, irrational. The doctors agreed this was the most humane approach. Did you at any point consider that Sarah had a right to know she had given birth, that she had a right to decide whether to parent her child or place it for adoption?" Robert's jaw tightened. She was a minor. The decision wasn't hers to make. His testimony continued in the same vein, clinical, detached, utterly convinced of his own righteousness. He showed no emotion when Diane presented photos of Lily growing up, milestones he had helped ensure Sarah would miss. He remained impassive when confronted with the evidence of falsified medical records and backdated consent forms. Only once did his composure slip. When Diane asked if he had ever regretted his actions, ever wondered about the grandchild he had given away, a flicker of something, pain perhaps, or simply annoyance at being questioned, crossed his face. "I did what was necessary," he repeated. "I would make the same decision today." In the gallery, Sarah felt a strange sense of clarity. She had spent weeks anticipating this moment, wondering if her father would show some sign of remorse, some acknowledgement of the harm he had caused. Now, hearing his cold justifications, she realized she had been hoping for something he was incapable of giving, genuine regret. Michael, sensing her distress, reached across the gallery divider to squeeze her hand. Behind him, Lily sat between Kevin and Jennifer, her expression solemn as she observed the grandfather she had never known and now never wanted to. The cross-examination of Robert continued into the 9th day of the trial, with Diane methodically dismantling his defense. She introduced financial records showing payments to doctors and administrators, correspondence with the adoption broker who had placed Lily with the Chens, even a memo to Dr. Harrington specifically requesting that Sarah be kept comfortable and uninformed about the procedure. By the time Robert stepped down from the witness stand, his reputation lay in tatters. The distinguished attorney, the pillar of the community, was revealed as the architect of a scheme that had torn families apart for the sake of appearances. The final days of the trial brought expert witnesses, psychologists who testified about the trauma of Sarah's experience, legal scholars who contextualized the violations of medical ethics and consent, even a historian who placed the case within the broader context of forced adoptions throughout the 20th century. As the trial neared its conclusion, national media coverage intensified. The courthouse steps became a gathering place for protesters holding signs with slogans like "My body, my choice," and "Justice for stolen babies." Support groups formed for women who suspected they might have been victims of similar schemes, and a hotline established by Diane's firm was flooded with calls. The night before closing arguments, Sarah sat with Michael on their back porch, watching the sunset. Lily was inside, on a video call with Maya and Ethan, their relationship having blossomed despite the unusual circumstances of their connection. "Whatever happens tomorrow," Sarah said, "we've already won something important. The truth is out there now. No one can hide it anymore." Michael nodded, his arm around her shoulders. "You've done something remarkable, you know that? You've given a voice not just to yourself but to all those other women, those other families." Sarah leaned against him, drawing strength from his solid presence. "I couldn't have done it without you, without any of you, Lily, Kevin, Jennifer, even my mother in her way." As darkness fell, Sarah felt a sense of peace settle over her. Tomorrow would bring the final act of this legal drama, but the most important healing had already begun. Her family, expanded and unconventional as it was, had found each other against incredible odds. That, more than any court verdict, was the true victory. Judge Matsuda's courtroom was packed beyond capacity on the day of closing arguments. Additional chairs had been brought in, and still people stood along the walls, a testament to how the case had captured public attention. Sarah sat at the plaintiff's table, calm despite the gravity of the moment. The weeks of testimony had been exhausting, but also cathartic. The truth, so long buried, was finally being spoken aloud. Diane Hoffman rose for her closing argument, her posture confident but not theatrical. She had built her career on substance rather than showmanship, and today was no exception. "Your Honor," she began, "this case at its core is about consent, about autonomy, about a young woman's right to make decisions about her own body and her own child. Sarah Winters Reeves was 17 when her parents orchestrated what can only be described as a medical kidnapping, sedating her without informed consent, delivering her baby while she was unconscious, and arranging for that child to be adopted without her knowledge, let alone her permission." Diane walked slowly along the jury box, making eye contact with each member. "The defense would have you believe this was done out of parental concern, out of love. But I ask you, is it love to violate someone's bodily autonomy? Is it love to steal their child and then gaslight them into believing it never happened? Is it love to maintain a lie for 23 years, depriving a mother and daughter of their relationship, a father of his child?" She paused, letting the questions hang in the air. "The evidence in this case is overwhelming. We have heard testimony from nurses, administrators, and even Mrs. Winters herself, all confirming the deliberate deception perpetrated against Sarah. We have seen the falsified medical records, the backdated consent forms, the financial transactions that greased the wheels of this unconscionable scheme." Diane returned to her table, picking up a photograph of Lily as a toddler. "This is what was stolen from Sarah Reeves, not just a baby, but a childhood. First steps, first words, first day of school, all the moments that make up a life together. No amount of money can restore those lost years, but your verdict can restore something equally valuable: justice." The defense's closing was clinical, focused on legal technicalities, statutes of limitations, the rights of parents over minor children, the supposedly speculative nature of emotional damages. Robert sat stone-faced throughout, occasionally glancing at Sarah but never at Lily. As the jury filed out to begin deliberations, Sarah felt a curious lightness. Whatever the verdict, she had done what her 17-year-old self had promised in that final diary entry. She had found a way to make things right. The deliberations lasted just under 6 hours, surprisingly quick for a case of such complexity. When the jury filed back in, their faces were solemn but resolved. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" Judge Matsuda asked. The foreperson, A middle-aged schoolteacher with kind eyes stood. "We have, Your Honor." "On the claim of medical battery against Robert Winters, how do you find?" "We find in favor of the plaintiff." "On the claim of fraudulent concealment against Robert Winters, how do you find?" "We find in favor of the plaintiff." The verdicts continued in the same vein. Count after count, the jury found in Sarah's favor. When it came time for damages, they awarded her $3.5 million in compensatory damages, plus an additional $10 million in punitive damages. But it was the final part of their verdict that meant the most to Sarah. The foreperson read from a prepared statement. This jury also recommends that the district attorney investigate the systematic practice of forced adoptions facilitated by the defendants and their associates, with a view toward criminal prosecution where applicable. A murmur ran through the courtroom. This wasn't just a victory for Sarah and Lily. It was potentially the beginning of justice for countless other families torn apart by the same network of doctors, lawyers, and fixers. Outside the courthouse, in the bright afternoon sunshine, Sarah stood surrounded by her family as Diane addressed the press. Lily held her hand tightly, while Michael's arm provided steady support around her waist. Kevin, Jennifer, Maya, and Ethan stood nearby, a visual reminder of how their family circle had expanded through truth rather than contracted through lies. "Today's verdict sends a clear message," Diane was saying. "No one, regardless of wealth, regardless of social standing, has the right to violate a woman's autonomy or separate a mother from her child without consent." This case was never just about Sarah Reeves or Lily Chen. It was about every woman who has had her choices stolen from her, every child who has been denied their heritage, every family separated by systems that prioritize convenience and appearances over human connection. A reporter raised her hand. "What happens next, Ms. Hoffman?" "We've already been contacted by over 40 women with stories similar to Sarah's. We'll be pursuing a class action lawsuit against the medical facility where these births took place and working with prosecutors on potential criminal charges against those still living who facilitated these illegal adoptions." Another reporter called out, "Mrs. Reeves, how do you feel about the verdict?" Sarah stepped forward, her voice steady. "Grateful, vindicated, but mostly I feel hopeful that this case might help other families find each other, might give other women the answers they've been seeking." She glanced at Lily. "No amount of money can replace the years we lost, but the truth has given us a foundation to build something new together." The assembled media erupted with more questions, but Michael gently guided Sarah away. They had said what needed to be said. The rest of their healing wasn't for public consumption. That evening they gathered at Sarah and Michael's home for a quiet celebration, not of the monetary award, which seemed almost incidental, but of the justice finally served, the truth finally acknowledged. Margaret had declined an invitation, understanding that her presence might complicate the moment, but she had sent a text to Sarah. "I am proud of your courage. It's more than I ever had." As they sat around the dining table, Kevin raised his glass in a toast. "To truth," he said simply, "long buried, but never forgotten." "To family," Jennifer added, "found and formed in the most unexpected ways." "To second chances," Michael said, his eyes on Sarah, "and to healing." Sarah looked around at these people who had become her expanded family, her husband, her daughter's father and his wife, their children who were Lily's half-siblings but felt more like family with each passing day. The journey had been painful, the revelations shattering, but the outcome was something precious beyond measure. "To all of us," she said, raising her own glass, "for writing a new ending to this story." In the months that followed, the impact of the case rippled outward. The district attorney opened a formal investigation into the private facility, where Sarah and other young women had given birth under dubious circumstances. 2 doctors still practicing medicine had their licenses suspended pending review. The adoption agency that had placed Lily with the Chens was shuttered, its record seized. Robert Winters, facing potential criminal charges and professional disgrace, suffered a second, more severe heart attack. He would survive, but his days as a feared litigator were over. He agreed to a divorce settlement that left Margaret financially secure but free of the marriage that had bound her to decades of lies. Margaret herself found an unexpected purpose in the aftermath. She began working with a support group for women searching for children adopted without their consent, using her insider knowledge of how these arrangements worked to help reunite families. It wasn't redemption exactly, but it was something close to it, a way to make amends for her complicity. Claire Phillips, the woman who had testified about her similar experience, was reunited with her son in a private ceremony that Sarah, Lily, and Michael attended as honored guests. Watching mother and son embrace for the first time in 30 years, Sarah felt the circle closing, felt the healing extend beyond her own family to others who had suffered the same injustice. 1 year after the verdict, on a crisp autumn day, Sarah stood in her backyard watching Lily, Maya, and Ethan set up for a barbecue. Kevin and Jennifer were bringing dessert, and Michael was manning the grill, a ridiculous King of BBQ apron tied around his waist. Her phone chimed with a text from Dr. Levine, her therapist. "Thinking of you today. Proud of all you've accomplished this year. How are you feeling?" Sarah thought about the question as she surveyed the scene before her. How was she feeling? The journey hadn't been easy. There had been nightmares, panic attacks, days when the weight of recovered memories felt crushingly heavy. But there had also been joy, connection, the building of relationships that should have existed all along. "Whole," she texted back. "I'm feeling whole." As she slipped her phone back into her pocket, Sarah caught sight of Lily watching her from across the yard. Their eyes met, and something passed between them. An understanding, a recognition, a silent acknowledgement of all they had overcome to find each other. Lily crossed the lawn to join her. "Penny for your thoughts?" she asked, echoing a phrase Sarah often used. "Just thinking about how far we've come," Sarah replied. "How different everything is from a year ago." Lily nodded, her gaze thoughtful. "You know, I've been wondering something. That first day when I was following you home from school. What made you notice me? I thought I was being so careful, so inconspicuous." Sarah smiled. A mother knows when someone is watching her child, even a mother who didn't know she was a mother. "That doesn't make any sense," Lily laughed. "Doesn't it?" Sarah put an arm around her daughter's shoulders. Some connections transcend logic, transcend time, transcend even memory. Some connections are simply meant to be. Across the yard, Michael called out that the food was ready. Kevin and Jennifer arrived with an elaborate cake decorated with the words "Family Reunion, Year 1, causing groans and eye rolls from their children. As they gathered around the table, the unlikely family created from secrets and lies but nourished by truth and love, Sarah felt a sense of completion. The circle that had been broken 24 years ago had finally closed. Not perfectly. There were still scars, still absences that could never be filled, but meaningfully, genuinely, beautifully. The young woman had kept following the cop's wife until the shocking truth was revealed. But the revelation wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. A different story, a better story, written not by those who would control and conceal, but by those who would seek and speak the truth, no matter the cost. And in that truth, they had all found something worth more than any court settlement, more precious than any justice system could provide. They had found each other. They had found home.